Pay $50,000 or the wedding's off, my daughter fiancés told me, thinking I was just a simple banker. Everyone at the party laughed. I just smiled and made one call. He laughed at my business card. Actually laughed. Right there in front of my daughter, in front of the other guests, in front of everyone who mattered to her. Said my kind should stick to small shops. The way he said it, with that smirk, that casual dismissal, like I was some pest that had wandered into his world by mistake. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that his father's company had been trying to merge with mine for months. Begging, actually. Their lawyers had been calling my office every week, practically on their knees, asking for meetings, for partnerships, for anything that would keep their sinking ship afloat. But there I stood, in the aftermath of public humiliation, my daughter's face burning with shame, while this entitled boy treated me like I was nothing. Like the 30 years I'd spent building something from nothing meant nothing. Like the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the times I went without so she could have everything, like none of it mattered because I didn't wear the right suit or drive the right car. I didn't raise my voice. I couldn't. The pain was too deep, too sharp. It cut through me like a blade, this realization that my own daughter was embarrassed by me, by everything I'd built for her. So I just made one phone call. One quiet, controlled phone call. And by morning, everything he stood on was mine. Before we continue, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this one will make you rethink arrogance. Because this is about more than business. This is about what happens when you mistake quiet strength for weakness. You see, I remember the first time Ethan walked into my restaurant. My family's place, nothing fancy, just honest food and honest work. The furniture was old, sure, worn smooth by decades of customers who'd become family. The menus were handwritten because I believed in the personal touch, because every dish had a story, a history. But when he walked in, when he saw the checkered tablecloths and heard the way I greeted my regulars by name, his expression changed. I watched it happen. That subtle shift from polite interest to barely concealed disgust. "Oh," he said, looking around like he'd stepped in something unpleasant, "so this is what you meant by family business. Cute. Cute. Like my life's work was some quaint hobby. Like the blood, sweat, and tears I'd poured into building something meaningful was just cute." He assumed I was uneducated. Assumed I was barely middle class. Assumed that because I chose to work with my hands, to serve people directly, to build relationships instead of just profit margins, that somehow made me less than him. Less intelligent. Less worthy. Less, everything. I stayed calm because I've learned that anger without control is just noise. But inside I was burning. Because this boy, this child who'd never worked a day for anything in his life, was looking at my daughter like she was damaged goods because of where she came from. Because of me. The pain of that realization, that my own child might see me the way he did, it nearly broke me. But I watched. I observed. I saw how he talked to the staff, how he barely acknowledged them as human beings. I saw how he talked to Lena, like she was a project to be improved rather than a person to be loved. And I knew. I knew this wasn't love. This was conquest. But the real knife twist came later, when he laid out his demands. His proposal wasn't about love or commitment. It was about optics. About image. About proving that the DeLuca family was worthy of the privilege of joining his. "I want a corporate wedding," he said, like he was ordering from a menu. "Something that shows we're serious. Something that reflects the merger of our families, potential." The way he paused before potential. Like he was being generous, even acknowledging we had any. Then came the ultimatum that shattered whatever illusions I had left. "I need your father to contribute $75,000 to the wedding fund," he told Lena, right in front of me. It's not about the money, Mr. DeLuca. It's about optics. People need to see we're marrying up, not down. Marrying up. Not down. Those words echoed in my head for hours afterward. They confirmed what I'd feared from the moment I saw how he looked at my restaurant, at my life, at me. In his world, in his mind, my daughter was marrying up. Which meant I was down. My family was down. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for, it was all just something to be elevated above. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. This boy, who'd never known want, never known struggle, never known what it meant to build something from nothing, was demanding I prove my worth. Demanding I pay for the privilege of his attention to my daughter. 3 days to decide, he said, like he was doing us a favor. Or the engagement ends. I didn't argue. I couldn't trust my voice not to break. I just nodded, because the pain was too raw, too deep. I watched my daughter's face, saw her torn between embarrassment and desperation, and I realized I was failing her. Failing her in a way I'd never imagined possible. That night, alone in my office above the restaurant, I sat with documents spread across my desk. Financial reports, acquisition papers, legal briefs, the real picture of what I'd built over 3 decades. DeLuca Holdings wasn't just a restaurant. It was a carefully constructed network of investments, partnerships, and holdings, all disguised under subsidiary names, all designed to look smaller than they were. I'd learned long ago that in business, it's better to be underestimated than overestimated. Better to let people think you're small while you quietly acquire the pieces that matter. Better to let them mock your handwritten menus while you're signing the checks that keep their lights on. And there it was, buried in the financial reports. Granter and West, Ethan's father's supposedly impressive corporation, owed my companies over $2 million across 6 different accounts. Vendor payments, consultant fees, licensing agreements, all overdue, all in default, all legally mine to collect whenever I chose. They mocked small business. They laughed at family operations. They sneered at the idea that someone like me could understand their sophisticated corporate world. But every empire falls the same way, one unpaid invoice at a time. The irony was perfect, surgical in its precision. While they were planning how to graciously allow my family into their circle, they were standing on ground I already owned. While they were demanding proof of my financial seriousness, they were defaulting on payments to me. While they were treating me like some quaint small-town businessman, they were financially dependent on the very companies they didn't even know I controlled. I called my legal team that night. Not in anger, I'd moved beyond anger into something colder, more focused. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about truth. About showing my daughter, showing everyone, who was really standing where. The acquisition papers were drawn up by morning. Clean, legal, unassailable. By the time Ethan's family was planning their next humiliation, their company would belong to me. But first, I had to endure one more night of their contempt. The charity dinner was their idea, of course. Another opportunity to display their superiority, to show off their connections, their influence, their position in society. I was invited as an afterthought, seated at table 12, far from the main action, close to the kitchen doors where the help came and went. The message was clear: you're welcome to attend, but know your place. I watched Ethan work the room, introducing Lena to his friends, his colleagues, his father's business partners. Watched him frame their relationship as his gracious decision to look beyond class differences. Watched him present himself as magnanimous for choosing love over social advantage. The lies were stunning in their audacity. His father gave a speech that night. About family values, about the importance of choosing the right partnerships, about how business and personal relationships reflected character. The crowd applauded. Lena smiled nervously. And I sat there, knowing that in 6 hours, everything he was saying would become grotesque irony. "You know, Mr. DeLuca," Ethan's father said when he finally acknowledged me, his voice carrying that particular tone wealthy people use when they're performing magnanimity, "it's admirable how you keep your business running by hand. Some men just don't scale, and there's nothing wrong with that. The world needs people who understand their limitations." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, it was worse. It was polite. Condescending. The kind of laughter that says, "We're all being very civilized about this unfortunate situation." I looked at my daughter in that moment and saw her die a little inside. Saw her realize, maybe for the first time, exactly how her new family saw her father. Saw her understand that this would be her future, apologizing for me, explaining me, making excuses for the man who'd given her everything. That's when I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. The acquisition papers had been filed at 11:30. At that exact moment, while they were laughing at my limitations, I legally owned everything they thought made them superior to me. The phone call came at 11:52. I excused myself politely, stepped outside, and listened to my lawyer confirm what I already knew: Granter and West was now a wholly owned subsidiary of DeLuca Group Holdings. Every asset, every contract, every employee, including Ethan's father, now reported to me. When I walked back into that dining room, everything had changed. Not for them, they were still laughing, still performing their superiority. But for me, the pain had transformed into something else. Something colder. Something final. I approached their table with documents in my hand. The room gradually quieted as people sensed something shifting, something ending. "Mr. Granter," I said, my voice steady now, controlled, "congratulations. As of 5 minutes ago, Granter and West is now DeLuca Group Holdings." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the ice melting in glasses, could hear the soft whisper of expensive fabric as people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ethan's father stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You can't, this is impossible." I placed the acquisition documents on the table, right next to his half-empty wine glass. "You missed 6 vendor payments to my companies over the past 8 months. Your board voted to sell rather than face bankruptcy proceedings. I acquired the debt this morning at 40 cents on the dollar. I just came to meet my new employees." The transformation was instant. Color drained from faces. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phone cameras started clicking as people realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, the complete inversion of power happening in real time. But it wasn't triumph I felt. It was exhaustion. Bone-deep weariness at having to prove my worth in a language they understood. At having to become what they respected in order to protect what I loved. I looked at Lena, watched her process what had just happened. Her father, the embarrassing small businessman, the quaint restaurateur, the man she'd been apologizing for, owned everything. Had always owned everything. Had been supporting their lifestyle while they mocked his. You owned everything they mocked," she whispered. I didn't need to prove who I was, I told her, and for the first time that night, my voice carried all the pain I'd been holding back. I needed them to show who they were. That's when Ethan tried to salvage the situation, tried to reframe his cruelty as business acumen. "It was just business talk, sir, don't take it personally. You know how these corporate events go. Just business talk. Like dismissing my life's work was just networking. Like humiliating me in front of my daughter was just professional banter. It's always personal when you mock a man's dignity," I said. "When you demand he prove his worth to earn your basic respect. When you treat his love for his child as a transaction you can approve or deny." Lena removed her engagement ring in the silence that followed. Didn't say a word, didn't make a scene. Just quietly placed it on the table next to the acquisition papers and walked away. The news coverage was inevitable. Corporate heir loses engagement after father's company bought out overnight. The story had everything the media loved: power, humiliation, poetic justice. Ethan's father was forced to resign within the week, unable to explain how he'd failed to recognize that his biggest creditor was sitting at table 12. But the real story wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet conversations afterward, the way my daughter looked at me with new understanding, new respect. The way she finally saw that strength doesn't always announce itself, that power doesn't always wear expensive suits. Lena works with me now, helping modernize the company while keeping its soul intact. She understands something she didn't before, that you can build an empire and still make handwritten menus. That you can command boardrooms and still know your customers' names. That choosing to appear small doesn't make you weak, it makes you strategic. The community rallied around us after the story broke. Customers who'd been coming to the restaurant for years suddenly realized they'd been eating food prepared by someone who could buy and sell half the city. But what mattered to them wasn't the money, it was that I'd stayed. That I'd remained the same man who remembered their orders, who asked about their families, who treated their business as a privilege rather than a burden. That's the real victory, though it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like survival. Like finally being able to breathe after holding your breath for 30 years. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's strategic. It's the moment when the people who mocked you realize they were standing on your ground the whole time, that their contempt was built on ignorance, that their superiority was funded by your success. But revenge isn't the right word, because revenge suggests I did this to hurt them. I didn't. I did this to save my daughter from a life of apologizing for who she was, where she came from, what her father chose to build. I did this to show her that dignity isn't negotiable, that self-worth isn't determined by other people's approval. The pain is still there. It always will be. The pain of watching my child be ashamed of me, even for a moment. The pain of realizing that my love, my sacrifice, my life's work could be dismissed as inadequate by people who'd contributed nothing to the world but their own arrogance. But there's something else now, too. There's the knowledge that you don't need to raise your voice to be respected. You just need to own the room, literally. You need to understand that real power is quiet, patient, strategic. Real power doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. Real power just writes the checks that keep the lights on while other people argue about who deserves to flip the switch. Have you ever been underestimated because of what you own, or what they think you don't? Have you ever watched someone you love be embarrassed by your choices, your sacrifices, your different definition of success? Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who wouldn't recognize value if it was paying their salaries? Comment your story below, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this world is full of people who mistake quiet strength for weakness, who confuse humility with inadequacy, who think that because they can't see your power, it doesn't exist. They're wrong. And sometimes, they need to be reminded of exactly how wrong they are. Sometimes they need to learn that the person they're dismissing, the person they're mocking, the person they think isn't worth their respect, sometimes that person is the one signing their paychecks. Sometimes the small businessman they're laughing at owns the empire they're begging to join. Sometimes the man they think is beneath them is actually the ground they're standing on. And when they realize that, when the truth finally cuts through their arrogance and their assumptions, that's not revenge. That's just justice. Cold, quiet, patient justice. The kind that doesn't need to raise its voice because it owns the microphone.